Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Brian of Hudson County, and I'm glad that you could join me again today. Today is not going to be a traditional sort of style video where I'm going to be taking a look at a TTRPG or something along those lines. Rather, this is going to be a bit more like a vlog, I guess you could say, because I am in the middle of the process of creating a basically a print version of one of my role-playing games. When Cat McDonald first proposed their artisanal game jam, where the basic idea was is that you sort of taught yourself new skills in the process of creating your game utilizing like typically non-computer things as much as possible. But what I decided to do instead was find one of my own games, create like a special edition print version of my game, Sageuk Roleplay in Joseon. For those of you who don't know, Sageuk Roleplay in Joseon is a game that I developed about a year and a half ago now, I think, utilizing Harmony Drive and one or two other systems where basically you are role-playing characters inside of a historical Korean drama, which in Korea is known as Sageuk, hence the name. So that gives you lots of different materials and systems and things so that you could play and a lot of information to kind of help people who are not familiar with Sageuk in general, to kind of inform you about the basics of life in the Joseon dynasty. It's particularly like the middle to late dynasty around like the 1700s, early 1800s. Around that time period is particularly when this game kind of features. So because I wanted to make a traditionally bound book, all by hand and everything, meant that obviously I had to teach myself a lot of the basics when it comes to Korean bookbinding, because I wanted to make it at least somewhat, at least as authentic as I could to the time period. And just to give you an example of kind of what I'm looking at, I have one here. Now, obviously, this is not an actual book for the Joseon period. That would be insane. But rather instead, this is basically like a modern sort of journaling style book that is sold in Korea for basically replicating a lot of the style and techniques though that were utilized in that time period. This, as you can see, looking at it, this is what we call a Sidestitch book. You've probably seen some of these before, but probably associated with countries like China and Japan. China is actually where this style of bookbinding, I believe, was originally developed, like in like the Ming Dynasty or maybe even the Song Dynasty, and it obviously became relatively popular, and then was the basic idea of binding books in this way was then exported to other countries like Korea, Japan, Vietnam. And it was typically used for binding most books until sort of like modern, sort of Western style bookbinding became more popular. Particularly the style of book that we're all probably familiar with when it comes to like soft cover books with where you have, I believe the title is, I believe it's called like perfect binding, where you have a text block and then it's kind of like glued right directly to the cover. One advantage of this particular style is that it doesn't actually utilize that much glue at all, which I really like. And basically all the pages here are held together by the thread. Not the thread that you actually see, but rather instead there is a second set of stitching that you normally can't see that's like underneath the cover that holds the actual block of pages together, the book block. And instead, this thread is basically just holding on the cover. Although, obviously, you can make it nice and pretty if you wish. Like a lot of modern Japanese-style side-stitch books will have like patterns and things and the stitching and stuff like that. Multiple holes instead of just like 5 or 4 holes along the side and that's it. So yeah, the basic idea is I kind of wanted to get my book to kind of look like this, where you have a fabric or paper, like heavy paper cover. You have your text block on the inside, stitching down the side. One other thing that is nice about this particular style of bookbinding is that it actually makes it relatively easy to use thinner, cheaper paper than a lot of printers will normally use, because if you look very carefully at one of these pages in this book, hold it open. Now this is traditional Korean paper. This is hanji. But if you look carefully, it's actually hollow, right? Because each of these pages in the book is one sheet of paper that's actually been folded in half. This particular journal, because it's intended for writing in, it actually has an extra page kind of inserted in the middle. But obviously a traditional printed book where you would have been using woodblock to print on the pages, it would not have had that, because instead you would have your big sheet, you print the block, usually with a pattern in the middle, and then you would go and you would fold it in half, right? And then you take your page, stack it with all your other pages, and then bind it along the edge here, right? So it actually only involves printing on one side. Now, the book that I'm currently working on, I am using a nicer than standard printer paper. You probably can't necessarily see the quality, but as you can see, it is still at least mildly transparent. When you fold it in half, you can't really see through it unless you're looking under it like under super intense light and there's like dark colors on the other side. But you can see through it just by itself, right? So you would not be able to use this paper for like a traditional sort of like zine or something, or a traditional zine or something, but I think it would work pretty well for this. So that's the idea. I can use a nice-ish but still cheap paper to print it on and then put it together, and then I don't need to worry about bleed or transparency because it's folded in half. So unless it's like super thin, you're not going to be able to see through it anyway. So yeah, that's the basic idea behind this book. So basically for the rest of this video and any subsequent videos that I make as a part of this set is really going to be taking a look at the actual process that I'm doing. Partly just to kind of show people how you kind of do side stitching, or rather a side stitch bound book. And also just for people who are interested in the way that I'm making it. So yeah. Hopefully you'll come and join me again on any subsequent videos that I make as a part of this, and thank you very much for joining me. Have a good day.